Okay, we are live now. Hey everybody, welcome to the Autoimmune Connection, where people get together to connect the dots between autoimmune disease, diet, and lifestyle. I'm Christina Findell, your host from cleanplate.com, and I'm here tonight with some of my favorite people in the world. We've got Nikki Trescott, a nutritional therapy practitioner from Autoimmune-Paleo.com and author of the Autoimmune-Paleo cookbook.
Hello.
Hey Nikki, how are you doing tonight?
Good.
Yay! And we've got Eileen Laird from Phoenix Helix, whose new
Hello.
ebook. Hi, Eileen. Uh, Eileen has a new ebook out called Reintroducing Foods on the Paleo Autoimmune Protocol that discusses tonight's topic, reintroducing foods. So we're really glad to have you here. You're the expert.
I think we're all experts.
For me, I've never actually reintroduced foods the right way.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I will defer to you on this one. So that's our topic tonight. Do either of you want to say more about who you are, what you're doing, why you do it? Eileen?
Well, sure. I'll start. I guess I should assume not everyone knows who I am. So my name is Eileen. I blog at Phoenix Helix. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and the autoimmune protocol was the key to making my flares go away. And I've been able to reduce my pain by 95% without the need for any immunosuppressant or steroid medication. So I'm really grateful for that. And my blog is about sharing that information and helping people with autoimmune disease heal in a similar fashion. So that's just a little bit about me.
Hey. Nikki?
And I, like Christina said, I wrote the Autoimmune Paleo cookbook. I write at autoimmune-paleo.com, and I've got celiac and Hashimoto's disease. And I write about food, and I blog lots of recipes. I was vegan for 10 years, so I kind of took my cooking background and turned it into a blog. And so now I write recipes and work with people as a nutritional therapy practitioner. And I'm in the process of moving to Oregon to kind of get out of the city and start learning about living off the land and homesteading. So I'm really excited about that.
That is really exciting. I'm really jealous.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so we're here to talk about, again, reintroducing foods. So again, Eileen, your book, you're basically the local community expert on this. Your book includes a detailed step-by-step of the reintroduction process, how to do it, why to do it that way. You have a sample food diary and a bunch of recipes specifically designed for reintroducing certain foods correctly. So we're just going to talk about why we do it this way and why it's important to do it this way instead of all at once like I did. So I wanted to ask you guys, going through the reintroduction process, or after you've been on the AIP for a while and you're feeling good and you're ready to start kind of testing your boundaries, what was the deciding factor for you to start reintroducing foods? Why did you go for it?
Nikki, why don't you start this time?
All right. So I started reintroducing foods mostly because I just wanted to see if I was more sensitive. I'd been on the autoimmune protocol for 30 days, and I think I tried almonds first, and they did not work well. And I was kind of like, oh, that's weird. Like, I just assumed that they'd be fine. I'd always eaten almonds, and I always assumed that they were fine for me. So when I had that reaction, I kind of went, whoa, like I need to spend more time on the autoimmune protocol. And so I actually did the elimination diet, continued for another couple months until I'd been on it for 3 months. And at that point, I was kind of like really looking forward to expanding what was on my plate. You know, I wasn't desperate, but I was kind of like definitely looking for new flavors, different things to include in my meals. And seed spices and nuts were the first things that I was able to reintroduce. So it wasn't like, you know, I had a tolerance of certain things. I started with a little bits of different things, and, you know, certain things like nuts, I could tolerate them if they were soaked, and, you know, it was a process even even with things that I think a lot of people can tolerate, like nuts and seeds. Like with almonds, I started peeling them, well, soaking and peeling them, and then I could do them just soaked, and then I could do them raw, but then I could only have like, you know, maybe 10, and so it just kind of kept changing the variables to see what made them tolerable, not just to say, well, I tolerate nuts, and, you know, went crazy on them. So yeah, it was just kind of expanding a little bit what I could eat.
Yeah. I'm curious, as a vegan, did you eat a lot of nuts? Maybe more nuts than the average person would usually eat?
You know, I actually have never been a crazy nut person. I've never liked peanut butter, which is weird. My husband ate a lot of peanut butter, and I don't know, I didn't like it, and I actually I wouldn't let him near me after he would eat peanut butter because I was just like, ew, that smells really bad, like keep it away from me. But I've always loved almonds, so that was like the first thing that I was like, I really want to eat almonds again, and it was really surprising to find that they didn't really work that well for me. But I think it was from a digestive standpoint and not necessarily an autoimmune standpoint. I think being on the autoimmune protocol got me in better tune with what it meant to actually properly digest food. And so when I would just eat a bunch of nuts and like not chew them very well or whatever, I was just kind of like, oh, what is going on in here? Like, that is not good. Like, that's not normal. And I think before I didn't really know what that felt like, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I, as a vegan too, for a long time, I ate tons of nuts. They were in like every meal, a lot of like nut-based, you know, raw vegan treats and stuff, like every day. So it was no surprise for me to find out that they were a huge problem. But it might be the same thing. I was never very good at chewing them thoroughly or doing all the proper digestion stuff. So, Eileen, what about you?
Actually, there's before I jump in on my own thing, Mickey was cool about what you said, that you were surprised when you found out you couldn't tolerate the nuts when you thought they were not a problem for you before that, and that's just I think that's a question we get a lot, right, from people who are just learning about the autoimmune protocol, and they're like, but I have no problem with that food. I eat it, and it's no problem. And then it's not until you give it up for 30 days and then reintroduce it that you can really tell, right? So that was cool that you mentioned that. And then just for anyone who's watching, you can Google soaked and dehydrated nuts, and that is a way to make them a lot more digestible, and that recipe is in my little reintroduction guide, by the way. So my reintroduction process, let's see, I did the elimination diet for 6 weeks strictly, and then my motivation for starting reintroductions was probably an emotional one. I was starting to feel angry, actually, I think, about the food restrictions I had, and I think the reason, it's funny when I look back on that now, because I'm really grateful for the autoimmune protocol now, for how good I feel, and for this information being out there and being able to figure out what I can and can't eat. But when I did the autoimmune protocol, when you're doing the elimination, it's kind of like an act of faith. You haven't tested it yet, so you're just doing it because people tell you this can help. And I think the beauty of the reintroductions is, frankly, the first time you get an acute intolerance reaction, it's like, oh, that's why I was still flaring before I did the autoimmune protocol. That's why, even though I was getting better, I still had pain in my daily life. It was a lower level than when it was at its worst, but it was still there. And so the reintroductions for me, I don't know, it brought with it, there's always grief, I think, when you lose a food that you love, at least temporarily. I mean, I'm kind of rambling, but the goal is maybe eventually to be able to reintroduce a lot of these foods again as we heal. But in the beginning, let me see, dairy and nightshades were the two that had the strongest acute autoimmune reactions for me. They caused me a whole lot of pain. And so as soon as I saw that, I didn't mind giving them up anymore. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I feel about grains, and you know, people doing like 80-20 paleo, or like, don't you miss like beans, or you know, I don't miss any of those things because I know what they did to me, and it's hard to miss.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that makes complete sense. Okay. So what kind of foods did you start with when you went through the reintroduction process? Any?
Me?
Yeah.
So I did it again because I was just being emotional at the time. So I went with the foods I missed the most, and so I went straight to eggs. But I did start with egg yolks before egg whites because I had read that you can tolerate the yolks easier than the whites a lot of the time, and that it's often the white that is the problem. So I introduced the yolks first, and that wasn't a problem for me. And then I was lucky. I was able to reintroduce whole eggs right away. So that automatically expanded my, well, it's a convenience food. I think that's the beauty of eggs is you can have a quick snack or a meal without having to get a bunch of pans dirty and spend hours in the kitchen. So I was really excited to get that back. And then after that, I'm trying to remember what I would have, probably chocolate. I bet chocolate was next. And actually that was successful for me too. So I think once I had those two under my belt, it was funny. I think I thought at that point that, oh, I'm just going to be able to reintroduce everything. And really I was just lucky because at that point, once I started doing reintroductions past that, is when the reactions started happening. So I got an autoimmune reaction off grass-fed butter, which is mostly fat and pretty low in the allergens, and so that surprised me. I got an autoimmune reaction against, I did fermented goat's milk kefir because I just wanted to see if there was a difference between cow's milk, goat's milk, what is it, pasteurized versus raw because I had access to raw goat's milk, fermented versus not because I had read that there's all of these things can affect your tolerance levels, but for me, I learned that casein is casein to my body, so I had just as strong an autoimmune reaction to the raw goat's milk kefir as I did to the grass-fed butter. So that was the end of my dairy reintroductions. And with nightshades, I started with just a tiny bit of spice and felt 90 years old overnight and haven't touched a nightshade since. And that's one actually I don't, it's hard to forget how that feels, and so I don't know how long it will be before I'm willing to test those again. And then with nuts and seeds, it was a lot trickier because I think it's like what Mickey talked about. I think with nuts and seeds for me and maybe for a lot of people, it's not so much autoimmune as digestive. And they are hard for me to tolerate. They were back then, and they actually still are. If I eat a lot of them or eat them daily, I am going to get more inflammation in my body, but it's not a flare. It feels different.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I mean, I said before, I didn't really go through the process. I had been on the AIP for about 9 months, and then I don't even remember what happened anymore. This is so weird because something happened. I was extremely depressed I was very emotional, I was very stressed out, and something horrible happened, and I was very upset about it, and I just binged on everything I could get my hands on. And I kept this up for about 3 solid weeks of just like complete and utter depression. And I actually didn't have a flare or anything. I felt pretty much fine except for being depressed. And ever since then, I mean, I got back on paleo first because I had been binging on like ice cream or gluten-free pizza, you know, all these convenience foods, and it was really, really bad. And I'm so lucky that like it didn't set me completely back to square one. Like I didn't have any like serious gluten cross reactions to some of the foods that had like really bothered me before. I used to have like a really serious dairy allergy, and that was completely gone by this point. Mm-hmm. But I knew like if I stick with it, if I keep eating this way, I'm obviously setting myself up for more of the same problems that I fought so hard to get rid of. So I clawed my way out of my depression. I got back on paleo, I got back on the AIP, but I considered that like, well, if I could binge that bad for 3 weeks and not have problems, then maybe it's okay if I have eggs once a month or something. And I'm still doing that, and I'm keeping it up. You know, we had hard-boiled eggs for dinner tonight, but I do feel like I need to go back and do it properly so I really know for sure, like, is this okay? I just haven't done it yet. But yeah, it does go to show that, you know, like Mickey was saying earlier about her almonds and stuff, like it goes the other way too. Like foods that used to be a really big problem for you that you were expecting to have really big problems with when you reintroduce them, that may not always be the case. And so for me, it was just the moment I realized that the AIP really not only works to make you feel better, but I was able to tolerate like dairy again and feel okay. So that was just, it was a miracle for me, and that was my moment of like, this really is the best thing ever.
That is awesome. That much healing. That's awesome.
I know how lucky I am. Like I shared this story like after about 2 weeks of binge eating. I shared it on my Facebook page. I was like, you guys, I got to complain about this. I feel awful. I've been breaking all the rules, and I got so much support. It was great and stuff, but I still feel bad about it. A year or two later, like it's been a long time, and I still need to get back on the wagon like completely and do the process correctly, because I know it's important to know for sure how you really react to something, and to know whether or not you can include it on a more regular basis. So I wanted to ask you guys, this is a question I get a lot too, not only what foods to start with when you're reintroducing foods, but also are there any foods that I should not reintroduce? That's something that comes up a lot. So I wanted to see.
Yeah, I'll go for this. Gluten is like, do not even think about it. Like, don't do it, ever. Yeah. Don't even think about it. Don't have gluten dreams. Or don't even eat at a restaurant that celiacs don't eat at. That's how I feel about it. But yeah, it's a big don't bother. And for a lot of people, I really encourage people not to introduce dairy. Ghee is probably the most acceptable form of dairy, but I don't know. I'm not sure that most autoimmune people, it's really that possible for them to tolerate it that well. So yeah, I think in the name of caution, you know, dairy and especially for people with joint problems, nightshades are probably, they can probably assume that's not going to happen, you know. Obviously, you never know, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think Sarah Valentine said at some point that nightshades are basically just as bad as gluten to certain people, and that was my big like, ooh, I don't know if I'll ever try those again. But yeah, certainly gluten definitely is a big one. Eileen, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Do you have anything to add on any foods that you would not recommend people reintroduce, or the order in which people should reintroduce foods?
Sure, I'll talk about both of those. I had a quick question. Mickey, I know that you found that dairy was connected to your asthma, so I think you're really especially careful. Do you eat ghee? I was just wondering.
No, I can't tolerate it.
Even ghee? That's interesting.
I've had a practitioner tell me that she thinks I was a dairy cow in another life, and that I have a karmic intolerance. I mean, this practitioner is kind of an energy worker, and she said, you know, my intolerance to dairy goes beyond the physical. So whatever that means, you know, I can't do any dairy that's ever thought about being dairy, like ghee.
Well, let me talk a little bit about, I guess, order of reintroduction, the right way to do it. And so what's cool in Sarah's book, she has, I think a lot of you watching probably have the book, and so you already know this, and for those of you who don't, you should buy the book because it's awesome. But she has 4 stages of reintroduction, and she based it on what you're most likely to be able to reintroduce, and then also the most nutrient-dense foods that you're missing. So in the first category, I've been able to reintroduce everything in stage 1. And I think those are great ones to start with because they either really expand the palette of your recipes, like the seed-based spices, and if you've gone really strict and given up the fruit-based spices too, getting those back, you know, like cumin and coriander and so forth can be really just lovely to have those back in your kitchen, especially if you can't do nightshade spices. Egg yolks are so incredibly nutrient dense. They're really a wonder food. If you can eat them, you should. I think Chris Kresser even says 3 a day, and I think, gosh, it's even more than that, maybe from Paul Jaminet, if you tolerate them. They just think that they're better than a multivitamin. The egg yolks. Ghee, if you don't have a karmic intolerance to it, is, especially if it's grass-fed, has that magic K2 vitamin that's really hard to find in other foods, and that's supposed to be, I think they call it activator X, which just means that it works as a synergist with other vitamins in your body to kind of make them more powerful in your body, so it's just a really strong nutrient. Are those all the ones in stage 1, you guys, or am I missing one?
I don't have the list in front of me, but to my
I don't
knowledge.
either. I'm just trying to remember.
Green beans, are those in green?
Oh, those.
Yeah. My favorite rebel vegetable, AIP rebel vegetable. I don't know. I have
green
it in
beans
my
and the
book,
green
so I get people email me all the time. You say your stuff follows Sarah Valentine's work, but you have green beans. So yeah.
And that's so cool you brought that up, because I interviewed Sarah about this when the book came out, because I was like, well, shoot, you know, all of us label green beans as an AIP vegetable, including her, actually, on her blog. And she said that she really considers the stage 1 foods wiggle room foods, which means if you want to go super strict and give them up, she actually thinks that's the best. But if you need a little more flexibility and you find that too much to do, you can pick a few of those foods to keep eating, and if you don't get the results you need, you can give them up. And so I'm curious, for us, as a show of hands, I didn't give up the green beans or the green peas. What about you guys?
I didn't eat green peas, but I ate green beans.
What about you, Christina?
I never liked them in the first place, so I include them with legumes. I'm like, they're out. I'm never going to eat them again. But
okay, I love them.
Now that I know they're actually like mostly AIP approved, I'd probably feel better about eating those than tomatoes or something, which is one of my go-tos right now. So,
okay,
it's good to know.
Yeah, and then the other thing I just wanted to mention, when you were saying the order of reintroduction, another way you can approach it, or if you're going to do it category by category, there's a smart way to do it. So if you're going to do dairy as your first reintroduction, you don't want to jump to milk or cheese, because those are high in potential allergens. So you want to start with ghee and then grass-fed butter, and there's kind of an order going up from there in each category. Just like with eggs, you want to start with yolks. With seeds, you want to start with the seed-based spices and so forth. So that's just a little tip on, and with nuts, you want to start with soaked and dehydrated, like Mickey was talking about. So just a little tip from us to you on the best chance for a successful reintroduction, which is what we want, because even though I will say when a reintroduction fails, like with me with the dairy and nightshades, that was really important information for me. That was a key to my healing. So I'm now really grateful about it, but I cried a lot when that happened, and I knew I couldn't eat them anymore. And a successful reintroduction is like happy dance in the kitchen.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention earlier when we were talking about our motivations for reintroducing foods, mine was just complete and utter depression and desperation for like not wanting to cook and all of that. But one of the most common questions we get is like, oh, I think Eileen mentioned earlier, like, I don't have problems with these foods. Can I start reintroducing already? I've been on the AIP for like 2 or 3 weeks and I feel fine, or I'm not feeling a difference at all. Can I go ahead and reintroduce foods? So I wanted to talk a little bit about why people should do it, the healthy reasons for reintroducing foods, more so than, you know, mine, which was not healthy at all. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's healthy not to be restricted for restriction's sake. Like I think it's helpful to, you know, expand your list of foods that you can eat within a tolerable limit. So variety is really important. You know, with meats and vegetables and fats, and it's just when you're reduced down to a small amount of foods that you can eat, you know, doesn't give you the best chance for success as far as getting a variety of nutrients. And so that's definitely a reason for introducing foods if it's possible. You know, like Eileen was saying, all the different nutrients in foods that are able to be reintroduced healthfully. You know, we're not talking about grains and legumes and things that most people probably shouldn't be eating, but things like egg yolks are really amazing, and you know, nuts and seeds, they have lots of vitamin E. Vitamin E is really hard to get from other sources of the diet, so you know, if you can tolerate them, I think there's a good argument to be made just to be eating different foods.
Yeah, and one of Sarah's points, more than anything else, she's all about sustainability. Like any diet change, any lifestyle change has to be sustainable for it to matter. And so like those stage 1 foods being wiggle room foods, where like if including them is going to make or break your ability to stay on the AIP for a length of time that actually enables you to heal, then go ahead and include them, and you know, or whatever food that you absolutely need to get through it. And I think that's something a lot of people dive into it for restrictions' sake, and
I think both of us, Christina, are familiar with that because we were vegan, and you know, I know you were vegan for a long time. I was vegan for 10 years, and it was really easy to get caught up in like how perfect, you know, your vegan diet is, and you know, it's like I'm 100% for this long. And I think with AIP that's healthy to a certain extent, but then once you've experienced benefits, I think it's harmful for someone to keep going on that restricted diet just because they're, you know, afraid of foods that are like otherwise healthy, you know, like eggs. Eggs are a perfectly healthy food. And I've noticed, you know, a lot of people in the community, they know how long I've been at this, but if I post a picture of my breakfast on Instagram, it's like, oh, you eat eggs? You know, and it's kind of like this forbidden food, and it's like, you know, I tolerate them, you know, that's fine. We shouldn't, people shouldn't assume that just because for this transition period in your life, finding out like how your body reacts to different foods, that they're always going to be a problem, you know. So we're not talking about gluten, but we're talking about especially eggs. I think are really, the yolks are really important to get back in. Choline is like super important. It's hard to get in other foods unless you're eating a lot of organ meat, which most people aren't. So I don't know. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. And one thing, and this might be helpful to just, you know, say to everyone who's listening. So I think we three kind of go out of our way to make sure that the recipes that we post on our blog are autoimmune friendly, because we know that those are the recipes that are hard to come by. Regular paleo recipes, there's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of them, which is so cool, actually, that there are that many. But yeah, if you're following Instagram, which is more you know, informal and just little slices of life, that's not about being 100% autoimmune paleo. And so I can't see Mickey posting egg recipes on her blog, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, because it's what I'm eating, you know. I'm not going to fabricate this alternate reality where I actually don't think it would be healthy for me to only share autoimmune protocol stuff when it's a medium that is supposed to be representative of my life, you know. Like I'm not strict AIP, like right now I'm eating really close to AIP because I got a gut infection in Mexico and I'm healing, you know, so it's something that I go back to. But as soon as I'm feeling good again, you know, I'm going to be reintroducing different foods that I know that I have a history of tolerating just to expand my foods, and it's important, you know.
Absolutely. And I'm not on Instagram, but I'll just tell anyone who's listening. So I eat the foods that I have been able to reintroduce regularly. So I have an egg yolk. I have soup for breakfast every day, which that's what I started having when I went on the autoimmune protocol, and fell in love with that so much. I've just never gone back to eggs for breakfast because I love the soup so much. But I put an egg yolk in there every day, and that's for the work week. And then on the weekends, though, I'll have eggs for breakfast. I actually have chocolate every day, homemade in tiny amounts. Just so you know that I'm not 100% strict AIP either, but I do religiously avoid the foods that I learned caused me to flare. So by going through the reintroduction process, the ones that were abject failures for me, I don't eat those at all. And then like nuts and seeds, I just keep experimenting with them. And actually, I still can't eat them mindlessly, but I could, like over Thanksgiving, was it Thanksgiving? I think so. Yeah, Thanksgiving I made a pumpkin pie with a nut crust, and that was delicious. So by all means know that if you're following the protocol now, that in the future it should be able to expand. That's absolutely the goal. I agree with you guys on that.
I see someone asking a question here. I don't know if you guys have the Q&A boxes up, but someone said rice. I will be totally honest, I tolerate white rice just fine. I don't eat it. I don't even have it in the house right now, But it's the kind of thing that, like if I'm traveling, I might have some white rice at a restaurant, just because it's calories, and you guys know how hard it is to travel like this. Food, you know, of course I would love to be eating more nutrient-dense, healing food, but sometimes if you can just get salmon and rice, like, that's good enough. And I actually ate rice last week when I was really sick with this GI infection. Hope it's not too much information to share that I had really bad diarrhea, and I could not stop it, and rice did the trick. I was like, you know what? I have a history of knowing that rice stops me up, and so I was like, you know what? I know when to use this tool in my toolbox. So, you know, so I don't eat rice regularly, but I know I tolerate it, and it does not cause an autoimmune reaction, although I don't digest it well. So
that's really interesting. Rice is actually the only food I have reintroduced the correct way. It was about I was about 7 months on the autoimmune protocol, and I decided I'm going to try white rice. I wanted something starchy, easy calories, and it did not go well. And to this day, like, even though I've introduced other foods and do fine with those, I cannot eat rice. I get symptoms. It makes my throat swell up. It's really bad. So it's really one of those, you know, if it works for you, that's awesome, and if it doesn't, then you need to stay away from it.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, Christina. Keep going.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay. I was just going to say I reintroduced rice also recently for the first time, and did fine with it. White rice is what we're talking about, right, everyone?
Yes. Yep.
Which, if you're following, I think most of you who are watching this probably know that it's the hulls in grains that contain the anti-nutrients and enzyme inhibitors. And so since white rice has had that hull removed, provided you don't have a reaction to it, it's actually easy to digest for some people, like anything. It's like easy to digest for some people, and to the point that Paul Jaminet says it breaks down 100% into glucose in the body and does not need the liver involvement for that glucose to be used by the body. So that's why he includes it in the perfect, I was going to say perfect rice diet, but the perfect health diet. Sarah Ballantyne recommends it as a stage 4 reintroduction, so she doesn't recommend you start there with your reintroductions, but if you've reintroduced some other foods successfully, have been on the autoimmune protocol, or have been able, you know, personalized for you for a while, and you want to give that a try, it is, like Mickey said, it's a convenience food, which we don't get a lot of on the autoimmune protocol. And so I guess I don't think I said. So I was able to reintroduce that successfully. So I can eat it, but it's interesting. There was no negative reaction at all. I digested it easily. There was no joint pain. But I got, even though I cooked it in bone broth with ghee on top for added fats, I still had the blood sugar crash, and I started craving sugar the week that I was eating the rice. So that was interesting to me, because that's not a reaction I have felt in the 2 years that I've been paleo. So it doesn't feel like it's a positive food for me, but if I'm traveling and there's a sushi restaurant, then I'm going to be pumped that there's something on the menu I can eat.
We have one more question about organic cornmeal. Personally, corn scares me.
Yeah, it's a no-go for me. I won't eat it. I tried it once, and it made me bloat up like I was pregnant, so no-go.
Mickey, did you try corn or cornmeal?
I just tried, I tried a corn chip, like a non-GMO corn chip, and then I tried some whole grilled sweet corn, both same reaction.
Yeah, I'm kind of afraid to try it too, because I know it's a grain, and I'm afraid of grains. I think I could see myself someday trying what you just said, the whole grilled corn. I wouldn't mess with cornmeal. It's not important to me. I think there are paleo alternatives. And be curious if I... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but the other thing about cornmeal too is it's just ground dried corn, which it's kind of like with grains. You know, maybe if you took corn and you soaked it and sprouted it or prepared it correctly, it might be something that's tolerable for some people, but I don't think cornmeal is going to be, it's probably not, it's like a, you know, like a flour. We do this with grains, you know, we take the raw reproductive part of the plant and just grind it up instead of actually soaking it and sprouting it and preparing it properly, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So one of the...
Oh, you go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the deciding factors, I think, for reintroducing any food was for me, the criteria is like, you know, what am I going to get out of this nutritionally? Like eggs have a lot of great stuff in them, or ghee,
Mm-hmm.
you know, those are really great foods. But then you have like cornmeal or grains in general just don't have much nutritionally. And then also in their like cooking application, there are paleo or even AIP substitutes that would work just fine and probably be more nutrient dense and less inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
But those are my criteria.
Mm-hmm. I agree totally. I see Maria, I think, asked about the soup recipe I mentioned. If you go to my blog, which is phoenixhelix.com, in the recipe section, you'll see it. It's homemade chicken soup. And then, Christina, you're going to have a handout that people can get after this. Is that right?
I can do a summary guide. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to give you work. Were you planning on doing that?
No, but I can totally throw one together.
Okay. If so, I'll send you the link to that soup, so it'll be in the guide.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Done with that one. The source for, we have a question about source for stage 4 food lists. The stages of reintroductions come from the Paleo Approach by Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. So you can find those in that book. I don't know if it's available anywhere online. Either of you know?
Don't think so.
I don't think she has them broken down into stages online.
Right. So yeah, you can find it in that book.
It's also in my reintroduction guide, since I was writing it in alignment with the Paleo Approach. It's in there too.
Right. Okay. Yes. So yeah, check out one of those two books, but we don't have a link online. Yeah. And then we're kind of running out of time here. I wanted to get to real quick. What is the exact process of reintroducing foods? We've been talking about it, but we haven't actually detailed how to do it. So one of you want to take that?
I think that's Eileen's boat right now.
I have written about that recently. So yeah, so I'll go through the process. So the first step is directly from the Paleo Approach, and Sarah recommends taking a series of really tiny bites, 15 minutes apart, 3 times. And I think that's just to make sure you don't have almost an allergic reaction. You don't want to have a big portion of the food if that happens. I've never experienced a reaction that quickly, but I'm sure some people do. The autoimmune community is very diverse. So then the next step, as long as you pass those little mini bites without a problem, is you have a normal size portion of the food. This is important. Don't binge. I can't tell you how many people will email me, or they'll post to my page or in one of the groups I moderate, and they'll say, "Oh darn, I can't have insert whatever food here," but then they'll tell me how much they ate of it, and it's like it's more than any human being could digest who didn't even have digestive problems. So you want to have a normal sized portion of the food, and then you wait 72 hours and monitor your body for a reaction. It'll vary from person to person and food to food how fast you'll notice a difference, and we can probably share that in a minute because it's interesting. For me, usually it's the next day. It's usually around 24 hours later on average for me that I notice the reaction, but occasionally it's faster than that. And then if you clear 72 hours and you're still feeling good, or the reaction was so subtle you're like, hey, that can just be a normal variation in my day, I really don't know if that was the food. The final stage of reintroduction is to eat a little bit of it every day for a week and then just see how you do. And I think that's the step a lot of people skip because it takes longer. but if you skip it, you miss the cumulative inflammatory effect that a lot of foods can have. Like for me, for example, I knew with nightshades, with trying it once, that I wasn't going to eat it every day because I knew immediately it was inflammatory. But for nuts, I had like a mild inflammatory response, and it was pretty subtle. And if I had just said, okay, that's cool, I can eat them again, and then moved on to the next food reintroduction, within a week or two, I would have had more joint pain, and I wouldn't have known if it was the nuts or the new food or two that I had reintroduced in that time. But by eating them every day for a week, it was really clear to me that they were inflammatory for me, just at a lower level. So those are the 3 phases that I recommend anyway.
So we were talking a little bit about, and I think this is another one of those really common questions we get is, how do you know you're having a reaction? What are the symptoms of a reaction? And we always say, like, it depends. Like, everyone's different. It could involve absolutely anything. So I wanted to hear what some of your food reactions are, weird or ordinary or what.
I'll let one of you jump in on that one.
When I have soy, I get a rash on my arms, on the insides of my arms, which is fun. When I eat chocolate, I get acne around my mouth. When I eat nightshades, which this reaction's been kind of going away for me, I've been able to eat some nightshades lately, but my hands swell up and they get like twice as big and puffy and red, and my joints hurt. And eggs have always been digestive. Nuts and seeds have always been digestive, except for sesame, which I get a rash for. Let's see if there's anything else. Dairy, I have an anaphylactic reaction to, so that one's easy. Lots of immediate swelling and not breathing. Did I cover all the foods? Nuts, seeds, nightshades. Oh, beans and legumes are like instant, like, stomach pain and lots of flatulence. Yeah, I think, and gluten, of course, which is very strange. I have celiac disease, but I don't get gut symptoms besides, like, irregular stools. I don't get any pain when I eat gluten. I just stop being able to speak or use my brain. So I lose feeling in my face and in my hands, and I kind of turn into a total vegetable. And it totally sucks.
Me too, I get the same. And it's like from gluten, from most grains, and from some of the gluten cross-reactive food. My whole neurological system just shuts down. I get migraines, I can't think, I can't speak, I can't move. And it's...
Do you find it hard too, Christina, like if you eat somewhere and you suspect that you have been like cross-contaminated with gluten or something, it's really hard to put your finger on it and be like, ooh, that's gluten, because you kind of, like, for me, I'd like to pretend that it's not, but part of me is like, ooh, I really can't think, and I'm bumping into things, and like, and it just gets worse. It's like, while I'm at the restaurant, I'll start to kind of like, ooh, I feel a little weird, and then the next day, I'm just done, I
usually feel it, like, within 15 minutes or so, I'll get a massive headache, and I'll know something. And I don't like eating out at places that aren't strictly, like,
celiac friendly.
Yeah, like if they have a gluten-free menu, I feel more or less okay if I know I can get like some seasonal fruit or something. But like we went out
I look on Yelp and I look, and if people write like I'm a celiac and I've eaten here and I didn't get gluten, I'm like, okay, that's at least I'll start asking them questions,
Yeah, that's a great starting place. But yeah, I if I suspect there may be cross-reaction or cross-contamination or anything going on, then I will not eat it. I would rather starve than get gluten. So one of my weird reactions is that anytime I have dairy, I get hiccups. And I used to, as a kid, I would have hiccups like 2 or 3 times a day, and I also had dairy 2 or 3 times a day, and I never would have thought of hiccups as being like a reaction to a food. So that's kind of like what I tell people when they're like, well, what constitutes a food reaction? I was like, literally anything, like hiccups.
Do any of you guys get emotional reactions to foods?
I have more recently. I did a bunch of, this is kind of, it's related, so I'll mention it without going into great detail, but I came to paleo through the GAPS diet, which is a low-starch version of paleo. So for 18 months, I actually didn't eat much in the way of starchy vegetables. And I decided to test that theory. And so I did a bunch of starch reintroductions, including rice and sweet potatoes and green plantains and sprouted lentils. And what made me think of it is the sprouted lentils. When I ate those, a cloud of depression descended that was out. It was so clearly outside of myself. I felt like I couldn't shake it. And it was absolutely a gut brain response. It wasn't familiar with anything I had ever felt before, and it didn't lift for a few days until the lentils had left my system.
Yeah, the last time I got gluten or had a gluten reaction to some kind of food, within 12 hours I was pretty much suicidal. Like, I was as depressed as I had ever been in my life, and depression is something that I've struggled with through my illness and my autoimmune diseases and stuff, and it was horrifying how quickly it happened and how seriously I bottomed out. I had never expected to feel that way again, and it's just it's crazy.
Another food reaction I get, it's now that I'm more in tune, I'll get sorry, inarticulate moment. People will write me on the blog who are new to the autoimmune protocol and ask this question, and they feel like they're not in tune enough with their body to know. And if you really do follow the reintroduction process, including all 3 phases, you will be able to tell. But I'll say it gets easier with practice. So I'd say when I first started my reintroductions, it was more acute reactions that were easier for me to spot, but now I'm so in tune to my body and I'm so stable. I think that's part of it. On my modified version of the autoimmune protocol, I feel so good all of the time that if I reintroduce a food, I can tell right away when something shifts. But the first thing that happens to me is insomnia. Usually now I sleep really well. I'm on a regular sleep schedule. I fall asleep quickly. I sleep deeply. I wake up feeling good. If I reintroduce a food that my body doesn't like, I'll have trouble falling asleep. I'll toss and turn all night long, and I'll have brain fog in the morning.
That's really interesting too, insomnia. We have one comment from someone who has diabetes, and her food reactions sometimes cause elevated blood sugar that seems to take twice as much insulin to get down. I thought that's crazy. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I could see that though, because when you have a food reaction, it's stressful and it can increase cortisol, and cortisol increases glucose. So, you know, anytime your heart's beating fast or whatever, it's going to be a stress event. So I could totally see that.
That's really interesting. We have another question about what type of chocolate people have successfully reintroduced, and if it's homemade, is there a recipe somewhere?
I have a recipe. I can share that link too. Mine's really simple. I buy really high quality cocoa powder. It's unprocessed and organic. It's Rapunzel's the brand I like, and I just combine that with coconut oil and a little bit of raw honey, and it makes these very simple and delicious chocolates that my husband said if I could eat store-bought chocolate, I'd be really disappointed because I'm used to these now, and they cook up fast. I think it takes me maybe 5 minutes to make them, and I pop them in the freezer, and you can eat them an hour later.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
When we did a hangout a couple months ago with Kelly from A Girl Worth Saving, and one of the questions was brands of chocolate, and I think, Eileen, you said you were like the chocolate expert. You had all the brands. So
yeah.
If people want to buy their own chocolate, that would be safe. What would you recommend?
Theo, Alter Eco. Whole Foods has a brand called 365. I'm trying to remember. Those are the 3 off the top of my head. Read the ingredient lists all the time to be sure. Most chocolate, including that sold in health food stores, has soy lecithin. It's this ubiquitous ingredient that is in every food imaginable. You don't want to eat chocolate that has that in it. And be careful about the allergen statement on the package. If you're really sensitive like I am to dairy, I won't eat a chocolate bar that says processed in a facility that, you know, may contain dairy or something like that. But I believe Theo, Alter Eco, and Whole Foods 365 are 3 for sure that are pure ingredients.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Yeah, Mickey, you have you don't eat. Well, I'm trying to remember. You
I
said
eat
you're
chocolate.
intolerant. Okay.
I eat chocolate even though I probably shouldn't. Yeah, you know, it's something that I think we all struggle with, eating things that we know aren't totally optimal, and that's definitely one of my things that, you know, I eat it every once in a while, but I have to be very careful about the soy because that's where I get the rash. And even just the lecithin, even that tiny amount, gives me a rash. So,
Do you have a favorite brand?
I don't eat chocolate enough to have a brand. You know.
There's also, I think, a paleo brand called Eating Evolved.
Okay,
I've seen
I've
on.
had their bacon truffles, which they don't make anymore. So sorry for making you guys, you know, sad, but they're really good. They have good other chocolate too. I've had that.
I like Equal Exchange. They have some really great flavors. I don't know what the allergen statement is on those though, but I love their varieties. They're really good. We have time for like one more question, really quick. This Matt is on a rotation diet and feels like he doesn't have enough food for a rotation. So he brought back eggs to help and is torn about what to add next. Legumes, grains. What are you guys' thoughts on rotation?
I think it's a good idea to rotate, but I don't know that I've really specifically heard of anyone really needing to do like I guess eating foods that are not good for autoimmunity in order to heal an autoimmune problem with like a rotation diet. So I get asked this question all the time. You know, my doctor says that on the autoimmune protocol, I'm going to become intolerant to these foods, and you know, I have to do a rotation diet, and I can't make it work with this few foods, which I think is kind of what Matt's asking. And what I would say is maybe try to not do like an official rotation diet, but just try to get as much variety and space out your meats as much as you can. So, you know, if you're going to eat red meat, there are other red meats you can eat: bison, elk, lamb. You know, it isn't just beef. And same thing with poultry. You know, you can do chicken, you can do Cornish game hen, you can do duck. There are different varieties of meat, and then especially when you look at seafood, there's like a million different types of fish and shellfish that someone could eat. So I think when people are looking at expanding the variety, you know, eating chicken every single day is definitely not optimal. You know, you should be expanding, especially into organ meat, and especially with vegetables. If you go to the farmer's market, you can get local varieties of vegetables that are a lot different than the few things you're going to find at the store. So that would be my argument for kind of an unofficial rotation diet, is just kind of getting as many different varieties of meats and vegetables as you can, and never really relying on one thing so much more than everything else. I don't know.
That's awesome advice. I tried to do a rotation diet on the AIP when I first started because I kind of went a little bit overboard. I wanted to have all my bases covered. I wanted to do everything right, and I wanted to absolutely maximize my chances of success. And I kept with it for about a week, and it wasn't fun, and I felt like I was going out of my way to find like different kinds of food. I mean, I think you certainly can do it if you have access to the entire like food list on the AIP. There's tons of different types of meat and vegetables and fruits out there and stuff. But if, you know, like me at the time, I didn't really have access to that kind of stuff. Like plantains and taro root are like the only two like safe starches I could find locally. So it really depends what you have access to and can afford, of course, too.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. And with what Mickey said at the beginning, I would recommend giving up the rotation before reintroducing grains and legumes.
Mm-hmm.
The rotation diet, I don't know. You'd have to. I don't think I've ever seen scientific support for that theory. I know it's a theory, and it's one often espoused in the alternative health community. But I haven't personally experienced anything like that. I did try a rotation diet before going paleo to help my rheumatoid arthritis symptoms, and it didn't help at all. And I don't do a rotation diet, and I've eaten a modified paleo autoimmune protocol for almost 2 years now, and I have not developed any intolerances to the foods I regularly eat.
I would also add, too, that I think the things that I hear people going overboard on and developing maybe intolerances to are things like nuts and seeds. And these are foods that I think we're not really equipped to be eating large quantities of. But I haven't really heard of someone that was like, you know what, I'm eating beef every single day and all of a sudden now I'm allergic to it. Like, I think that those animal proteins, I think our bodies are meant to figure out how to digest them, and our ancestors, you know, they weren't eating like 50 different types of meat. You know, a lot of them, depending on their culture, really only had a few sources of protein depending on where they were from or how they lived and how they hunted and stuff. So I don't really think it makes sense that if we eat too much of a meat, you know, it's going to make us allergic. But I think that something like avocados, I've heard of people just eating like 5 avocados a day and then all of a sudden developing allergic reactions to them. I think that kind of makes more sense. So, you know, I don't know.
So don't binge is what you're saying.
Yeah, don't binge. And it's actually really interesting that you really can't binge on meat. You know, that's another thing. Like, you know, you can't. So, but nuts, you know, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a little goes a long way with those.
Yeah.
There's one more question I want to get to really quick. It'll only take a second. Mary Hughes asks, she gets hiccups every time she has plantain chips or crackers. Didn't realize it could be a food reaction. Is this a good indication that she does not tolerate plantains? I would suggest look at the other ingredients that are also involved. I mean, it could be the plantains, it could be the type of oil or any seasonings that are used in those recipes, and maybe separate them out and try them individually to see if that happens. You never know. Any other thoughts on that kind of stuff from you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a sign that there could be some like overgrowth in the gut too. It might be feeding something that you know, is going on down there. So it's definitely something to investigate, like you said, Christina, the ingredients. And yeah, I'd be curious about other like starches. So if she's reacts to like taro root or yucca, or I mean, sweet potatoes are a little bit different in their starch content, but usually people that don't tolerate those starches will also not tolerate the other ones. So
very interesting. Okay, we are out of time. It was awesome. I'm so glad you guys could make it and we got to do this and hang out. It's always nice to talk with you guys, and I want to thank you so much for coming. I also want to thank everybody that watched live and asked questions. That was awesome. I can't wait to do it again. We're going to do it again next month. So if you want to find out when that is and what we'll be talking about, you can follow A Clean Plate on Google+ or subscribe to my YouTube channel for updates. And I would like to invite you to check out these ladies on their respective websites at autoimmune-paleo.com and phoenixhelix.com to see what cool things they're up to, which is like every day they have something awesome going on. So yeah, check them out, and don't forget to thumbs up the video on YouTube if you liked the conversation. You can always ask questions or leave comments, and find us in the links below. So thank you for coming. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
bye.